The first album I'm going to talk about is Buddha. While I do like this album, one had to go last, and the production on this album can be a little rough at times, and a lot of the songs they re-recorded for their next album, and I tend to enjoy those more. But it still is a really good album. It has songs like The Girl Next Door, which I really like. That's a cover of a Screeching Weasel song. And the song Time, which is very interesting because to me it's the most ska sounding that Blink ever got. Alright, the next album, both in my list and in chronological order, is Cheshire Cat. This album builds off of the same principle of Buddha. It's very youthful, energetic, but I think they do it a little better. The production's a little bit better. It still is a little rough at times. There's some screeching guitars, some pitchy vocals at times, but I think there is a undeniable youthful energy on this album, which I really enjoy. I like songs like Romeo and Rebecca, Touchdown Boy, Toast and Bananas, to name a few. The next album is 9. This is the second album with Matt Skiba as part of the band when Tom DeLonge was away. It's a lot darker and more experimental than its predecessor, California, and I do appreciate this. I do like some of the darker sounding songs on it. Like Black Rain is very experimental for Blink, very electronic, and it sounds really cool. I don't really like some songs like Happy Days, I Really Wish I Hated You, which is not bad, but it just sounds too modern to me. It sounds like there are too many pop songwriters on there, which is fine, but if I'm listening to a Blink record, I want to hear songs that they come up with organically for the most part. But this album still is really good to me, and I do like it. Next up on the list is One More Time. This is their most recent album, and it's the triumphant return of Tom DeLonge into the band. It's a very exciting release. I really do like a lot of the songs. Anthem Part 3, Dance With Me, Turpentine are some of the best Blink songs in my opinion. They're in that top tier. The things I will say about it negatively are a lot of the production elements I don't really care for, like the way the drums were mixed, the vocals sound very pitch corrected, which I understand because everyone uses pitch correction and modern studio tools, but there are ways to do it to make it sound less obvious. The way it was mixed is just a stylistic choice. I'm sure it's not like they messed up and did it wrong. They're one of the biggest bands in the world. They have access to top personnel, but it's just not for me really. I like to hear the sound of the guitars and the vocals out front sounding more natural as opposed to the drums. The next album is Neighborhoods. This is the first album back from their first hiatus, and I think it has some really great songs on it, some that are also in the very top tier of Blink songs like Ghosts on the Dance Floor, Kaleidoscope, Even If She Falls. Some of those are my favorites. It is interesting to note that the initial release only had 10 songs on it, and it excluded some of my favorite songs off the album. I know Even If She Falls and Snake Charmer, I'm pretty sure were not included on that album. So I'm much more inclined to listen to the deluxe edition to that. That's just something interesting that I've noticed. It does sound a little bit disjointed, this album, and that could be due to the fact that it was recorded mostly in separate studios for each band member. And it does kind of sound like it, even though I think it does have some great songs. The album kind of just sounds like everyone's doing their own thing. The next album is California, and this may surprise some people for it being so high, but I really do enjoy this album. And it could be due to the fact, actually probably is due to the fact that I have some nostalgia for it. This is the album that came out when I was getting into Blink, so a lot of these songs are very nostalgic for me, but I still think that it on its own is a great record. It's the first album with Matt Skiba. It has a lot of upbeat, catchy songs, which Blink has been known for. I'm not really sure why it gets so much hate, probably just because it was different. It wasn't with Tom in the band, and I'm not really sure what people were expecting, maybe something a little more in-depth. I think it does have a lot of more serious songs, especially the deluxe release that came out. It has songs like Los Angeles, San Diego, which are a little bit darker. And speaking of the deluxe album that came out afterwards, I think that this is really great. It's almost as good, if not as good, as the original album that came out. All right, the next album, Inema of the State. This is probably very surprising for a lot of people, given that it's at number 4 and it's their most popular, most influential album. I do love this album. It's near perfect for me. The only thing that I will say, and it might be a little unfair to the band, is that it has too many hits on it, which is something strange to hear, I know, but for me, when I listen to an album based on my own enjoyment of it, if I hear songs it's like half of them that I've already heard so many times, it's just not as enjoyable for me. So you can't really fault the band for this. This is a very good thing for them. That's what they wanted. But hearing songs like All the Small Things, What's My Age Again, Adam's Song, which are all very good songs, but I just don't find myself going back to that album as much for this reason. So that's why it's a little lower, but I still do think this album is near perfect. Next up is the Untitled album. This was their last album before their hiatus, and many say, and I tend to agree, that this is them at their peak. With this album, they were able to incorporate more serious themes and lyrics and a heavier, darker, more aggressive sound, but they still have very catchy melodies and choruses, and I think it all flows together nicely and it makes for a very good album. I think it's interesting to note that this album was on a strict deadline and they barely got it into the record company before the deadline, and so they were rushed when they were making this album. They were writing songs as they went, but they still came up with some very good offerings. Some examples of my favorite songs on this album are Here's Your Letter, Stockholm Syndrome, of course, Feeling This, Obvious. Really every song is great on this. I really also like their collaboration with Cure frontman Robert Smith. This was a very special moment for them, given that they're very big fans of The Cure, and the song turns out really well. The next album I'm going to talk about is Dude Ranch. I really love this album. I think it's incredibly fun. This album, like Cheshire Cat and Buddha before it, is very youthful. It's a little rough. It's very energetic, but it's very fun. I think Mark in particular really shines on this album. I love his songs, Lemmings, Josie, Waggy. They're some of Mark's best work in my Apple Shampoo, some of Mark's best work in my opinion. Tom also has some great songs on this too. I'm Sorry, which is the album closer, is one of my favorite Blink-182 songs of all time. Definitely in my top 5, I'd say. All right, and my favorite Blink-182 album of all time is Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. This was the album after Enema of the State, before Untitled, and I think it incorporates all elements of Blink into one album perfectly. It has the fast, energetic, youthful spirit of the first albums, and it has more dark lyrics, something that's a little more personal maybe. I think producer Jerry Finn, who worked with them on Enema of the State through Untitled, really helps them to find their sound and to take their catchy hooks and melodies and make it into something that's like geniusly crafted. I really love this album. My favorite song, I think, from Blink, Story of a Lonely Guy, is on this album, and it has so many underrated songs all the way throughout. Something I think is really cool is that each of the bonus tracks, What Went Wrong, Don't Tell Me That It's Over, and Time to Break Up, in my opinion, are so good that they could have fit on the album. Could have even been a single. So yeah, thank you for watching my list. Again, this is all based on my personal opinion, so I understand if you want to put albums higher than this, or if you don't agree with me about my Enema of the State take, that's fine. I would say every one of these albums is at the very minimum very good. So that just kind of gives some context what I'm going for here. This is really just based on what I listen to the most and what I personally think is their best material. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe. We put out all kinds of music content. We also write some music of our own that will be coming out very soon.